Hey YouTubers, I'm going to concentrate this fourth video on comparing the Mayan calendar to Western world events and also including the Dajjal prophecy along with it. So as I do this, I would like you to think about everything that was in the other two videos as well as what we're going to talk about now. I'm going to start again with the British Empire and the year 1752. I'm starting with 1752 because how well it coincides with the planetary wave of the planetary wave is the seventh cycle on the Mayan calendar, and it starts in 1755. But in 1752, there was a change within the British Empire where on January 1st, they adopt the Gregorian calendar. What was interesting about this is they were using a Julian calendar, and it will cause the calendar to skip 11 days. They adopt it in January, yet it won't become effective until September. So there you have that 9 and 11 again, even though it doesn't happen exactly on 9/11. You have elements of the 9 and the 11. Part of the 11 days will include 9/11. The days that are skipped are between September 3rd and September 13th. Okay, so moving on from there, the British Empire definitely fits the bill of the beginnings of our current beast system and the New World Order. You need to, because we're on the planetary cycle, we're going to think very globally now instead of nationalistically. So just talking about the British Empire, really the British are trying to make the world, all the world, England. And so it's a global situation. And it's the ruling headquarters for 360 years. I believe that time starts around 1585 to 1588. Please remember that these dates are approximate even within the Mayan calendar, and there's a lot of overlapping going on, but there's also a lot of interesting features as these power shifts change, because they do happen on remarkable dates of world and American history. So I want to give you one other interesting 9/11 fact that is very strange. If you think about the British Empire and how America broke away from it, they think back American Revolution, we were independent after that. Really, that's not so. We have something in American history called the Second American Revolution, because Britain really didn't treat America as if it was independent, for another 30 years. So they were kidnapping people on the high seas, taking private merchants' goods and raw materials, impressing private sailors into the British Royal Navy. So all this was going on until war broke out in 1812, and that's called the War of 1812. And that goes on for many years. It didn't just last 1 year. And in around 1814, there's going to be the turning point of that war is going to be when the American soldiers are fighting on the Great Lakes in the Battle of Champlain, and that battle is going to occur on 9/11. What makes it more interesting, however, is that there are 11 major battles in the War of 1812, this being the 9th battle of the 11th. So I just thought that was interesting that the turning point for this war was the 9th of 11 battles, and it's just one more, and it occurred on 9/11, and this is just one more occurrence of the 9/11 date and 9/11 numerology that is it's becoming more and more prevalent. So by the end of the 19th century, really the British Empire conquers every continent on the earth, including the Asian continent. Many people don't recognize how the European powers carved up China for opium. And I'm not going to get off into that. If you want to look up that history, it's interesting to note. After the Civil War, the United States also gets involved in all of this. But I'm going to move on to what's going on after the 360-year period of the Prophecy of Dajjal. So at the end of this 360-year period, the New World Order is transitioning its headquarters from London to Washington, D.C. This 360-year period begins approximately 1585 through 88 AD to 1945-48 AD. There's really no denying that this is when the United States of America enters the world stage as the superpower of the Western world, and there are some interesting dates that coincide with this and the Dajjal prophecy that lends quite a bit of credibility to it. I'm going to get to Israel and 1948, but before I do, there are some interesting years prior to that. So, as I've already mentioned, the British Mandate of Palestine occurs 9/11/22. But also, the breaking ground for the Pentagon occurs 9/11/1941, which is exactly 60 years before the 9/11 attack. Then Bretton Woods occurs in 1945. On 9/11/22, the British Mandate of Palestine is where the New World Order tackles Middle Eastern powers to prepare Israel to become its own state. I'm going to leave Israel for now to demonstrate how the New World Order economically and militarily controls the world and how that power shift to the USA coincides with the fifth night of the Mayan calendar. So in 1941, the New World Order breaks ground for the Pentagon on 9/11, which will ultimately make the United States the greatest, most powerful empire in the world, as well as usher in a time of the military-industrial complex. But pay close attention to how few differences there are between the goals of the United States and the British. The U.S. simply takes the torch from the Great Britain to carry on with British policies of world domination. Thus, it is neither British nor American, but New World Order at its core. So if you take the Mayan calendar dates from the 7th wave to the 8th wave, there's something very interesting in its Gregorian date conversion. Look at the last two digits of each wave. The planetary wave begins with 1755 and the galactic wave begins with 1999. Both the 55 and 99 are multiples of 11. Secondly, if you subtract the years, you get 244, where the last two digits are 44, an end time number. More importantly, if you take the 244 years, divide them by 13, which is the number equal to the 7-day night cycles of the Mayan calendar, you will get approximately 19 years, where each cycle is 19 years long and new information, new knowledge is happening in a 19-year cycle. This is where Ian Lungold talks about the generation gap. And it's also very close to the Mayan experts who note the exact same thing. It's here I'm going to point out that if you haven't listened to Ian Lungold's presentation of how the Mayan calendar is structured, it's going to be very difficult and make little sense to you in this video, because it's imperative to understand that context to understand the premise of this video. I left the playlist for his videos in the description. So anyway, there are 10 cycles to the fifth night to any of the waves. Thus, if we take 19, the number of years in each cycle in the planetary wave, and multiply them by 10, we get 190 years. So if we add 190 years to the beginning of the 7th wave, which is 1755, we get 1945. So the fifth night of the planetary or global wave of the Mayan calendar begins around 1945. Was there anything happening in 1945 that cements the efforts of the New World Order to make the USA its headquarters? Well, yes, there is actually a couple of things. First, military domination. With the U.S. show of force for it to use the bomb on Japan, it will show a willingness to front the military-industrial complex. The Pentagon being built is only the beginning. Secondly, the Bretton Woods system becomes operational with its institution of the IMF. What is more significant to the number 11, however, is that the Bretton Woods Conference begins deliberation with delegates from 44 nations and ends July 22, 1944. Here's another interesting point. The transfer of headquarters of the New World Order in the day that is like a month of the Prophecy of Dajjal approximates during Harry S. Truman's administration. Truman is the 33rd President of the United States, and since that time we've had 11 other presidents. Thus, one can point to the 1940s as where the headquarters of the New World Order is transferred from the British Empire to America. So how long does the Dajjal prophecy state that its headquarters will remain in the USA? A day that is like a month. And we learned in the last video that these days don't represent days at all, but represent years, like Daniel's 77s represent years. Thus, the time frame is approximately 30 years of American domination, at the beginning of which you have the Bretton Woods system, making the United States dollar the reserve currency of the world, with the United States holding 60% of the world's gold reserves. The Bretton Woods system made the United States dollar pegged to an ounce of gold. 35 of these dollars held the exchange rate for 1 ounce of gold between its member nations. This ensured that any country holding U.S. Treasury debt could exchange their United States dollar at a ratio of 35 to 1, whereas if they had $35, they could exchange it for 1 ounce of gold. So does this 30-year period of the New World Order, headquartered in the United States, play out in American history? Absolutely. The years between 1945 through 1975 are America's golden years, in which American society becomes the most pampered generation on earth. Kings of times past don't live as good as the middle class lives in this time period. Yet something happens in the 70s, and it is here where the New World Order begins to transfer its world domination to the Middle East. Its power will be in the form of oil. So in the year 1971, note how often these pivotal years happen on the 11th year, such as 1781, 1941, 1971, and 1971 was 40 years ago. The Nixon shock occurs. This is when Nixon unilaterally reversed Bretton Woods policy and left the member nations in a quandary, because although his action ultimately ends Bretton Woods as a policy on the world and for gold, I mean, he basically just abandons the entire gold standard. The United States dollar continues to enjoy reserve currency status. At the same time, the U.S. was negotiating with the Middle East, promising to exchange petrotechnology to them if they traded oil exclusively in the United States dollar and buy United States Treasury debt. Therefore, the United States transferred the dollar from the gold standard to an oil standard, and the New World Order secured the flow of oil to the rest of the world by controlling the dollar. The United States of America rises to its zenith during this 30-year period, when it begins to decline in the late 70s. During this time is the rise of the Middle East, as the Western powers supply it with the technology to make it rich, yet institutes usury debt as the foundation of its growth. While Israel is rising to a prominent state, all of the oil-rich republics of the Middle East are also coming into their own. The New World Order installs puppet regimes in most of these republics, with the understanding that they would buy U.S. debt and support the U.S. dollar by accepting it as the reserve currency and agreeing to trade oil exclusively in the U.S. dollar. This beast system controls the entire world with the flow of oil, its source of power. This is where we can compare the beast system of the New World Order in Satan's kingdom to that of Christ's kingdom. Satan derives his power from the oil of the earth, while the power of the kingdom of Yahweh is derived from the oil of the Spirit. In the parable of the 10 virgins, those who are wise have the oil of the Spirit, while the foolish worldly virgins must go and buy from those who sell oil. There's only one kingdom selling oil, and it's the oil of the earth. If it seems like we're living in a parallel universe, make no mistake, we are. Spiritual versus physical. And the digit structure of the number of 11 may be symbolizing that reality to us. Okay, I'm running out of time, so we'll have to end this. I wanted to talk about the Illuminati, Aleister Crowley, and the KKK, but it's going to have to wait till next time. Thanks for watching, guys.
Yeah, the world ain't what it seems, is it, Gunny?
No, sir.
You keep that in mind. The moment you think you got it figured, you're wrong.